add some European ETFs to your investment portfolio, then this is the video for you. I've selected 7 of the very best performing European ETFs. One of them has 3-year annualized returns of almost 30%. So I won't just be sticking to a single ETF provider, I'll be sharing investments from iShares, Xtrackers, HSBC, and also from Invesco. In these videos, I like to give you a really rounded picture of every ETF that I'm including. So I'll be sharing with you their 3-year and 5-year annualized returns, also their fees and charges, because we all know how important fees are when it comes to investing. I'll also be sharing with you their 3-year standard deviation, because standard deviation is a really good measure of risk. So where all else is the same with an ETF investment, what you're looking for is a lower standard deviation, which indicates a lower level of volatility and risk. And I'll also be sharing with you the number of equity holdings for each and every ETF and the top 3 holdings within that ETF. And in this video, I will be sharing with you some ETFs that I have never mentioned before on this channel. So I'll be breaking this video down into 2 sections. The first section will be the dividend paying ETFs. So they will be the income generating ETFs. And then the second section is going to be the European accumulation ETFs. So when you're investing in an accumulation ETF, all that means is that any dividends are reinvested into that ETF. So let's get started with the dividend paying European ETFs. So the first one is the iShares Core MSCI EMU ETF. The code for this is CEUG, and as I said, this is an income generating ETF. The annual dividend yield for this ETF is 2.63%, and this is paid semi-annually. So the 3-year annualized returns are really strong for this ETF at 15.25%, and 5-year annualized returns are even better at 18.54%. So when we're talking about annualized returns, that simply means that on average every year for the last 5 years it has achieved 18.54%. But obviously when you are investing, your capital is at risk, and some years your investments might do very well and some years they might not do so well. So those peaks and troughs are leveled out when you're looking at 5-year annualized returns, because you are getting the average. Fees and charges for this ETF are nice and low at 0.12%, and the 3-year standard deviation is 15.27. So the number of equity holdings is 216, and the top 3 holdings are SAP SE, ASML Holdings, and Siemens AG. Moving on to our next ETF now, it is the HSBC Euro Stocks 50 ETF. The code for it is H50E, and it's an income generating ETF with a dividend of 2.69%, which is paid semi-annually. 3-year annualized returns are 16.65%, and 5-year annualized returns are 15.17%. This has got a really low fee of just 0.05%, and the 3-year standard deviation is 14.26. The number of equity holdings are 50, of which the top 3 are actually Capital Cash Management, ASML Holdings, and then SAP SE. So the next ETF comes to you from Invesco, and it's the Invesco FTSE RAFI Europe ETF. The code for it is PSRE. It's an income generating ETF, so the annual dividend yield is 3.20%, and this is paid out quarterly. So 3-year annualized returns are 13.48%, and 5-year annualized returns are 14.40%. The fees and charges for this ETF are 0.39%, and the 3-year standard deviation is the lowest of these income generating ETFs at 12.30%. It has 486 different equity holdings within the single ETF, of which the top 3 are Shell PLC, Total Energies SE, and HSBC Holdings. And then finally, I'm moving on to a country-specific ETF that has had phenomenal returns, so I thought it was important to include in this video. It's the iShares MSCI Turkey ETF. The code for it is ITKY. The annual dividend yield for this ETF is 2.58%, which is paid semi-annually. Now let's get on to those phenomenal returns. So the 3-year annualized returns for this ETF are 29.80%, and the 5-year annualized returns are 11.92%. The fees and charges for this ETF are, however, pretty high at 0.74%, and the 3-year standard deviation is a whopping 33.5%. 46. Now, what I will say is with these country-specific ETFs, yes, you might see some phenomenal returns, but what often comes hand in hand with fantastic returns is higher levels of risk. So where you're taking on higher levels of risk, you're hoping that you will see higher levels of return, but that isn't always the case. And this is a very, very high 3-year standard deviation for an ETF. So the number of equity holdings within this ETF is just 16. So you're not getting a huge level of diversity when you're adding this ETF to your portfolio. You're simply getting those 16 Turkish companies. So the top 3 holdings are BİM Belasik, Akbank TAS, and Türk Yolları. So what I will say with these ETFs is part of the beauty of investing in an ETF is that normally you are getting a huge level of diversity. Now, what I wanted to do is include some country-specific ETFs in this video because they have performed very well. But if you're looking for an ETF that adds much more diversity to your portfolio, you might be wanting to look at ETFs that have a higher number of holdings within their individual portfolio. Okay, moving on now to the European accumulation ETFs, where any dividends are simply reinvested. So the first one is the iShares FTSE MIB ETF. So the code for this is CMB1. This is an accumulating ETF, and the FTSE MIB is a benchmark index for the Italian equities markets belonging to the FTSE Italia Index series. 3-year annualized returns are 23.58% and 5-year annualized returns are 19.48%. So fees and charges are 0.33% for this ETF, and the 3-year standard deviation is 16.34. There are just 40 equity holdings within this ETF, of which the top 3 are UniCredit SPA, Intesa Sanpaolo, and Enel SPA. Moving on now to the Xtrackers DAX ETF. The code for it is XDAX. It's an accumulating ETF with 3-year annualized returns of 17.46% and 5-year annualized returns of 15.06%. The fees and charges are just 0.09%, and the 3-year standard deviation is 14.69. There are also 40 equity holdings within this ETF, of which the top 3 are SAP SE, Siemens AG, and Allianz SE. And for our last ETF, I wanted to share with you a country-specific ETF again. So this is the iShares MSCI Poland ETF. The code for it is SPOL. It's an accumulating ETF with 3-year annualized returns of 17.04% and 5-year annualized returns of 15.69%. Fees and charges are pretty high at 0.74%. That's the highest along with the Turkey ETF. The 3-year standard deviation is pretty high too at 26.87. And what I said is where all else is the same, you're looking for a lower standard deviation because that indicates a lower level of risk. So these ETFs that you're seeing with kind of 20 or 30 or more as a 3-year standard deviation, they are much more risky ETFs. Number of equity holdings within this ETF is just 13, of which the top 3 are PKO Bank Polski and then Orion SA. And then the third holding you'll actually just have to read on the screen because I have really tried to pronounce this properly, but I am failing miserably. So should I give it a go? Pausageni Zaklad. I think I'll leave it. So sorry if anyone that's watching this knows how to pronounce that much better than I do. Let me know if you're invested in any of these ETFs or if you've added any of them to your wish list. I'd be really interested to hear. Also in the comments down below, please do let me know what ETF video you would like to see from me next. Thank you as always for taking the time to watch this video. If you have taken any value from it, I would really appreciate it if you would give this video a like, and I would appreciate it even more if you fancy subscribing. I'm getting very close to 10,000 subscribers and I really appreciate all of your kind support. All right then, have a lovely day and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye bye.